Hello and welcome to episode 132 of the Rollo and Slappy Show. Today is February 18th, 2019. I am Rollo McFlugel, and with me is Slappy Jones 2, and we're both from McFlugel.com. The show notes page for this episode will be McFlugel.com/132, where you should check out LibertyMugs.com, where we sell libertarian-themed mugs and T-shirts. So go buy some, help us out. And help yourself out because I think the mugs are pretty good. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Slappy, and he's going to talk about our episode topic.
Thanks, Rollo. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Today, we're going to talk about why conservatives are pretty much just as socialist as the Democrats or the Republicans or whoever. We want to touch on, we'll follow up on a story. I think we talked about it on the podcast a year ago about that girl on the Wildwood Beach. Pretty sure we had an episode on that. She was a 20-year-old girl with her daughter. Police ended up, long story short, police tackle her, beat her up, arrest her. And she didn't have any open alcohol. And that was the reason for the search, but she just kind of refused it. Well, she pled guilty to some things recently to put this behind her. So we'll get into that a little bit. But first, so you think conservatives are socialist?
Yeah, I do.
So what my guess is that whatever you're going to say is their response will be, that's not real conservatism.
Exactly. Or, it's funny because that is the meme that a lot of us use against the left when they're trying to implement socialism, and you bring up all of the horrible atrocities that socialists have committed over the years and communists have committed over the years. And they say, oh, that's not real socialism. And then when you kind of do the same thing with conservatives who have their own kind of pet socialist problems, namely police, courts, military, any government program that they want.
Walls.
Yeah, walls. I think most of them don't really mind Social Security. Or at least the boomers don't, because they're all
certainly don't.
Yeah.
They whine about that big time. It's
Right.
not an entitlement program.
Or the hands off my Medicaid. Get the government's hands off my Medicaid.
Yeah.
Or Medicare. I guess that's Medicare, not Medicaid.
Yeah, Medicaid's for you have to have like no assets. Right.
So, kind of ironic, isn't it? That they'll say, "Oh, that's not real social," mocking the lefties for doing the not real socialism thing, where that's exactly what they're doing with their programs. So it's not that I really want to do a well, you're being it doesn't have to rely on leftists for being hypocrites about socialism, and it shouldn't rely on that for this criticism to hold. But if you're going to really talk about how awful socialism is, then maybe don't approve of it yourself.
So all the policies that you like.
Right. So the big thing, the Big Socialist Project that was coming in over the last few years that these conservatives love to rail against was Obamacare, especially single payer.
Yeah.
And it was all the, it's a socialized medicine if we do this and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and I agree. Although what ended up happening was it wasn't quite socialized. Obamacare isn't socialized medicine if we want to get really into specifics. Yeah, and I don't know if we want to bring this up now or talk about it later.
Sure.
But
let's get into it. But first, I want to make one quick point. As I was browsing around on Twitter, I don't know who said it. It could have been some clown with 2 followers. I don't know. But they were replying to a thread on Trump using emergency funds to build a wall. And he said something like, remember how we didn't get to choose about Obamacare? How do you like not choosing about a wall, or something like that? Which is basically admitting that, yeah, we're doing this. We call your Obamacare socialism, but we're going to do the same thing with this emergency funds on the wall. Thought it was pretty ironic, pretty funny.
Yeah, I wonder what would happen if you question him on that and said, like, oh, so now you're a socialist?
Yeah, I of course ignored it and just went on. But I did think it was funny that someone would, who probably, based on the tweet, railed against Obamacare when it came and how it was unfair and how it was passed on however it was passed, reconciliation, and but then when Trump does it, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So yeah, this technicality, because I think it's good to talk about, because I think a lot of people aren't too careful when they talk about these terms, and maybe you should be. I don't think it's the end of the world, but it helps clarify things, especially when this other term that's thrown around all the time, and that term is fascism versus socialism, because now it is extremely vogue, and it was vogue about 100 years ago, I guess less than 100 years ago, to throw around the term fascist,
yeah,
without and even back then people didn't even understand what it meant. It's kind of funny. I was talking to someone one time, and he's a smart guy, and he made a comment about something about fascism got brought up, and he laughingly said, like, "Are you kidding me? Of course fascism is the suppression of free speech." And I was like, I didn't say anything, but in my head, I'm like, that's not what fascism is at all. But he said it like so confidently, like it was the very common knowledge that fascism is just suppression of free speech.
I wonder why he thinks that or says that.
A lot of people do, though.
Yeah, and
have you noticed that?
I mean, it's not till right now,
right?
And I'm thinking, like, why is that where they go?
I don't know. It's because they don't know. They don't act.
I guess they would say like book burning, maybe, or
yeah. I guess because there's been. I mean, there's elements of that,
of course,
in fascism that you can't.
Totalitarian,
right,
authoritarian government. But I'm just trying to think, like, what would it be? Because if you think fascism, most people think Nazis and probably the Holocaust.
Right.
Seems a little deeper than free speech.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting that fascism. Not interesting, because I'm not. I
mean, I usually don't talk about the Italians.
Right, and that's kind of where a lot of it got started. They don't talk about in the U.S. or Great Britain either, in the Western countries, because that's the Road to Serfdom was really the kind of the red pill for me reading that book. And that was Friedrich Hayek wrote that right after World War II.
So say right in the late 40s.
Yeah. And the point of that book was to say, look of what all of the horribleness that Germany and Russia with fascism and socialism that they just used, all of that whole disaster that happened. And everyone's saying how awful fascism and socialism is, but now Western countries are implementing the same policies. And it's like, man, you're on a road to serfdom if you do it that way. Because
you're on the road to serfdom.
Yeah. So it's interesting, like you said, that no one brings up Italy when it comes to fascism. It's because it's a shame, not a shame, but fascism
is the credit they deserve.
Yeah, because everyone associates fascism with the Nazis, and that means that you're putting Jews into concentration camps and wearing the shoulder, the armbands, right, and the the whole 9 yards with that. Where I think when you have to take a step back and look at how things were starting in that country. And I think we mentioned it before, but Gunther Reimann's book, The Vampire Economy, talks about what it was like doing business in Nazi Germany, in fascist Nazi Germany. And this was in the 1930s, and already...
I believe it was written in 1939.
Yeah.
Right? I think it was published right after the war started.
Yeah, the foreword was, I think, September 1939.
Yeah.
And he was already saying how much of a disaster the German economy was.
Right. So this was written before the war started.
Right. So, yeah, let's go ahead and define what fascism and socialism are. Do you want to take? I mean, I think we both agree, but
go for it.
Fascism well, let me do socialism first, since that's a little bit easier. Socialism is the central ownership of the means of production.
Means of production being
Capital.
Basically factories and
mm-hmm. Yeah. And whereas capitalism is the private ownership of the means of production of capital and everything. So what is fascism? Fascism is well, definitionally, it's the private ownership but central control, of the means of production. Which, that sounds kind of weird, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely.
But that's what it's because in Germany, and this is where like all the the corporatism comes in, and in Italy too, whereas you had a lot of well, especially in Italy with the syndicalism, you had a lot of the businesses getting together and forming these almost like trade groups where they determined the regulation of their industries. But these trade groups were the government. So you had this centralized regulation of private industry. The Germans did a little bit differently. It was much more of a top-down approach, but it's functionally the same thing. And we look at most mixed economies now, especially the United States economy, where it's funny. We call it a mix. We have a different term for it now.
Right.
We call it a mixed economy, and I even said it. But really, it's fascism.
Right.
Because we have the government is regulating everything.
I mean, you can go into business, but you need permission.
Right. And you have to follow all these certain rules and everything that the government
will lock you up.
Right. Now, it may not be as dramatic as like the really
20s, 30s Germany.
Right, because they were really, really a command economy. Like everything you did, you had to get permission to do it. But I mean, it's the same mechanisms are still in place. So back to the definition of fascism, the central ownership but private ownership,
central
control of the means of production. That sounds pretty weird, doesn't it? Like, it doesn't sound like that can really work very well.
It also doesn't sound like a huge distinction between socialism.
Right. Yeah. How do you square that up? If I don't, are we really saying that a private entity owns his property or his capital if someone else
materials?
Right. If someone else is controlling it, what he does with it, it sounded like the government's kind of claiming ownership of it or control. If they're claiming control of it, which means that it's subject to the state saying, well, you're not doing this the way we want it, so we're going to seize it. Like, who's ultimately claiming the ownership of it? The state. So, and Vampire Economy by Gunter Reimann, that's one of the big points he makes because...
Which, just a side note, that was an awesome book to read. If you don't know much about Nazi Germany outside of World War II, it's a really good book. It's easy to read, and it's just gives you a good feel for what it was like doing business in 1930s. Yeah,
let me second that. That is a really incredible book. Another good book about this time period, or a little bit later, was I think we mentioned it too, As We Go Marching by John T. Flynn, and that's about Nazi Germany, Italy, and the United States, and the fascism in each of those countries. Very, very interesting. That's a little bit harder of a read, but it's definitely worth the time and the effort. But the point that Reimann makes in Vampire Economy is that as fascism continues to function, as you keep going down this fascist economy, it's not a good system. We all talk about the issues of central planning, and that they don't have the price system to have resources be directed adequately or efficiently and produce good results. So the reaction of a more strongly fascistic government like you would have in Nazi Germany is not to relinquish power or control over the capital. It's to, as things fail, they blame the private actors and just take more and more control. So eventually, they just expropriate everything, and now the state just outright owns everything.
Right.
And now it's indistinguishable from a socialist economy, and that's why, I mean, they call themselves the Nazis. They call themselves the National Socialist Party, and people say, well, it's not social. Blah, blah, blah. There's all these arguments over whether or not they were socialists or not, but they pretty much were, especially as time wore on. And we see the same things with the United States. Take education as an example. Does the government ever say, hey, we've done a really, really, really bad job with education, so you know what? We're going to release some control over the education system and turn it back over to private hands a little bit. No, they always say we need more money, we need more resources, we need more control over it. So it's not as drastic as Nazi Germany, but hey, man, it's a pretty good foil for it, don't you think?
Absolutely.
So we can tie this even back into Obamacare, because we don't have an I mentioned that back a little bit ago. We don't have an outright socialist healthcare system right now, right? Even though, isn't that what the goal was, Slappy, with Obamacare, single payer?
Said.
Right.
You're talking to a union or something, and was recorded and released.
It was something like that, but I mean,
this was like a first step. It was a stepping stone toward a single payer.
Right. But I mean, it's not by accident that how it was written, not getting the single payer in there. We certainly can't say that Obamacare, we can agree it's not outright socialism, and it's absolutely not capitalism. But what did we say about the Italian form of fascism a little bit before? It was the industry leaders kind of getting together and coming up with rules. Well, who do you think wrote Obamacare?
Yeah.
It was the health insurance companies. So, and it was legislated via the government, and the government ultimately has control and power over it. So it's really kind of it's pretty short-sighted on insurance companies, in my view, to do that, because they're just you might get some short-term gains out of it, but.
Well, I think you'd have to, I think they're kind of, I don't know. It's almost like something's going in, you can either write it or you can be stuck with it.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, that's a little bit unfair.
I mean, their hands are kind of tied, because if you listen to any of them talk, now you never know what to believe either, but this certainly isn't good for a lot of them. A lot of them are pulling out of the markets for Obamacare where they can. Right. So it's not that this was a huge boon for them, although on the surface you'd think it would be.
Well, I mean, part of it was made sure that they had the and this was the big thing about whether or not the Supreme Court was going to strike it down, whether or not that was the penalty for not buying health insurance. Right. Where they said it was actually it's a tax, so this is now constitutional, even though it's very clearly a penalty.
And I mean, he went around campaigning for it, saying this is not a tax.
Right.
So John Roberts decided it was.
Yeah. But
whatever.
Yeah. But there's it just shows the benefit that they can glean from it. That would be.
Yeah, and they're right. I mean, I'm not trying to downplay any of that. They're right there with government. They're buddies.
I think it's an important point to bring up, because I think we tend to be a little bit too quick to just assign outright evil intentions a lot of times. Yeah. Well, and not to say
that in his book.
Who did?
Gunter Riemann.
Oh yeah.
where it's like you're a businessman, you're trying to do business. Now the Nazis come in, and he would say, like, you had to hire someone to be your liaison to the government, someone in the party. Otherwise, you're not getting anything.
Right.
You're not going to be able to continue to do business.
Mm-hmm.
So, their hands get tied by government action. And, you have a decision to make. Do I go out of business or do I play?
Right. Yeah, and we were talking about this in our little like quick hit stuff, and I think I don't know if we brought it up in the last when we had Guy Swan last week, but how my view on Twitter very much changed because of the way Jack was talking about Bitcoin.
We did kind of mention this, I believe.
It's that everyone's been dumping on Twitter and Jack for all the problems associated with the website, but I mean, what are you going to do? Say no to the government? And they're going to just, throw you in a cage, shut your company down,
take your living.
Yeah, not that absolves playing all ball with the government, but it's just a little bit more complicated than.
It's not as simple as just ripping everyone all the time.
So you can have your opinions on the policies of Twitter, but if they're going at the same time of implementing government hard money, or what we hope to be money in there, I mean, that's way more good than any sort of bad thing.
Blocking certain people and
like who cares if they block a few people, even if they're big
even
names.
If they shouldn't be, and even if it's like a problem, even if it's something I'd be against.
Right. Not who cares, but it's small potatoes compared to what they're helping to bring about in the world. Right. So it's man, we got off the kind of the subject of
totally
of what we're originally talking about, but
let's bring it back. Where were we?
Yeah. I was even talking about off the subject from where we originally were and saying that conservatives are actually socialists, but they're also fascists too, is what I guess the point is.
Yeah.
But okay, so that's where we can tie it back in. So a lot of the stuff the government does, and both the left and the right, conservatives and Democrats, or Republicans and Democrats, they favor a lot of government intervention. We could say that they're not only both socialists for what they favor, but they're also fascists for favoring. They're socialists for favoring that the government just outright performs certain market functions in the economy, like
I don't want to take it. Well, continue. I'm not going to take us off the rails again.
They're outright socialists for favoring full government takeover of the healthcare industry for people on the left, and for people on the right, the military and police, having the government. I mean, you question these people. And because they're always talking about how they're against socialism, and you say, well, okay, well, what about the police? Well, we need the government, blah, blah, blah. It's okay, but
government's function should be law and order and courts.
Yeah, okay, so
that makes it not socialist.
So you're gonna what is socialism? But the government takes money from people, and they are the ones that using that money, they bring something to market, quote unquote market. Like, how is the government taking your money in order to give you police services functionally different from the government taking your market to give you healthcare services?
Right.
And minarchists, who also believe in some socialism, when they talk about police, courts, and everything, although they're normally not as bad as conservatives are with how emotional they get. But they say that, well, it's different. These markets are different, such that for security, you can't have a normal free market doing it. And so you ask them, well, what's the difference? Like, what economic law is wrong, or what economic law does not apply to these security services that makes it such that the government needs to socialize it? And they, of course, have no answer. Or no good answer.
I think it's more likely that they just don't think about it. I mean, I never used to. I used to think it was the only possible way to have security was with the government.
Yeah,
this was a long time ago, but
well, it's not. I don't know if it's not that they think about it, but it's their evidence is they're not coming to the conclusions well. With this case, because it's really obvious with minarchists, because minarchists should or tend to have better understandings of how awful government is and how markets work, and should have a decent understanding of economics, that they can arrive at all these other conclusions that the free market is more moral and has much better results, but for police, courts, and military, well, no, we can't have it. And it's not because that they've analyzed the information, applied certain axioms and principles and laws to it, and arrived at a conclusion. Is that they've arrived at their conclusion that they believe that government is necessary and it needs to perform certain functions, and then they develop evidence to prove their conclusion, so that they have it backwards, and that's how they rationalize it.
Right.
And I think it's the same. It's everyone's kind of the same way, unless you're really drinking the Marxist Kool-Aid or something, and actually go through that to explain why socialism you feel is better than free markets and capitalism. But yeah, let's bring up a good example. Let's bring back the Emily Weinman. That was her name? Emily, I think.
Yeah, you're probably right. I don't have it up.
Yeah, so let's you kind of recap that story, but let's give a little bit of a recap of exactly what happened.
Yeah, doing this off of memory, she was sitting on the beach with her daughter, who was only a year or two old, maybe younger. She's 20 years old, and the Wildwood cops do this. They go around the beach and check IDs and see if you're drinking alcohol. I don't know if the rule has changed since this incident or not, but I know it. You go to Wildwood, don't you? Have you seen these guys out?
Wildwood Crest.
Oh, excuse me.
It's south of Wildwood. It's different. I mean, I said not that it matters to anyone, but Wildwood Crest is much more of a family town, and it doesn't have like all the.
Is it a dry town?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're not supposed to have alcohol on the beach, but everyone does. And as long as you're not carrying on, like there's never a problem. I mean, there's the police go up and down the beach. I've never seen the police there give anyone a problem, because it's a different demographic. It's more of a family crowd. Wildwood, it's a little bit more of a
bar scene and
senior week kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's still a lot of families there, but it's more like kids in their late teens, early 20s get a house
right
together. More of a sea isle kind of scene, I guess.
So anyway, she's on the beach. She had a cooler, which maybe there was twisted tea or something, but it was all unopened.
Yeah, and she was saying it was her aunt's.
She said it was her aunt's, and she was waiting for her aunt, and the cops come, and she said she's going to call her aunt, so she see her on the phone talking to someone. Well, the cops weren't having it. What did they? I know the cops went to her, and she got upset about it.
Well, they were claiming that they're giving her a hard time, accusing her of drinking alcohol, and she was like, no. And they gave her.
They went to give her a breathalyzer, and she refused.
No, she did. She gave it.
She did. You're right. She did.
And then I think they wanted to do it again or something.
Yeah, I think she did it twice. We had it's on video. You can see her doing this. And
then I forget what it was, but they just kept doing more. And she was, at this point, after you get breathalyzed twice or even once, she was starting to get annoyed and started, giving a little bit of lip back. Nothing really that bad.
No. I mean, these were two like meathead cops.
Right. And it got to the point where I guess they just started jabbing verbally back and forth, and now I can't remember how it escalated.
I don't remember how it escalated either, but it ended up with the cops tackling this 20-year-old mother.
After they said, you're about to get dropped.
You can hear that clear as day on the video. They tackle her, they punch her,
Yeah.
and take her in. The sad part of this, which if we want to skip to the end, is just this week, I saw in Philly.com that she pled guilty. Most of the charges got dropped.
Well, yeah, she got charged with
which is funny that most of them got dropped. She did nothing but sit on the beach.
Yeah, one of her big things in somehow the cop justified him punching her in the head while they had her pinned to the ground was
she's in a bikini. She doesn't have a weapon.
Yeah,
apparently
she spat on him.
Right.
So that's assault. And that charge got dropped.
So that got dropped. How many charges does she have? I thought there was like 5 charges.
I don't know exactly, but they, like everything else, they piled on charges.
Yeah, of course. Right, because there's like 2 cops involved, so it's 2 counts of this. But whatever. She pled guilty to maybe disorderly conduct. I can't remember what it was.
Yes, it was. I think
no jail time.
It was. It was like a year of probation. And she's not allowed. Yeah, she's banned from Wildwood's Beach for a year, which is interesting that they can. You can ban someone from a public place like that, but the disorderly conduct was that she was cursing in public.
I think there is going to be a civil case. Or hopefully there is. And
I think her lawyer, she and her lawyer are trying to pursue that. But it's funny that, I mean, this is why we wanted to tie this in, because all the conservatives who say that, you get your day in court and, blah, 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 and the police and the courts are there, and that's where justice is, and they're the good guys. Okay. And even if the police did the wrong thing, you'll have your day in court. And we can look at this video. I don't think there's anyone that can look at this video and say that the police were anywhere close to being anything but completely wrong, that they were the criminals in this situation. But what happens when you have your day in court? That the judge, in his infinite wisdom, still charges her with the crime of cursing
at someone who approached her.
Not just approached her, but was violently assaulting her.
Right. And so she was charged with, I have it up now. These charges were dropped. Aggravated assault of a police officer, resisting arrest, throwing bodily fluids, and obstruction. So she's resisting arrest of what crime?
Yeah.
Right? Like they just say they're going to arrest you, you resist. Well, now it's resisting arrest. Aggravated assault of a police officer. Well, they were the ones who came to her.
Well, I mean, she did put her head in the way. It made
of the fist.
Violent contact with their fist.
The fist, yeah. He was moving his fist, and she put her face in front of it. Throwing bodily fluids. I guess that's when that was it, right?
That was a spit.
Spit, apparently. I don't know. Obstruction of what? I don't know. She did the breathalyzer.
I guess
it moved on to the next.
I don't know.
Cops probably don't. I mean, who knows what they think? I don't want to pretend to know what they think, but
I don't think they think at all.
What? Right. But if you're going to go do your thing, get your breathalyzer, it comes out at 0. And instead of just walking away, like you should be a professional. You should be trained. You should know how to handle. If you're going to go harass people all day, you're probably going to get some pushback. Like you should know how to handle it. I don't know. But I don't know what the obstruction was.
I guess that if she was, I don't know. I mean,
there's more to the case that we don't know. Like you have to look at the court files. I'm sure there's something, but it just seems so. This case was absurd.
Right.
That didn't have to happen. It was all brought on by the police, and of course, they're not charged with anything.
Right, but the point I want to make here is for the people, and unfortunately, I don't think any of these people be listening to our podcast.
Probably not. But I've had conversation with people about this case, and I could not believe they were defending the cops.
But for the people that want to say that the government is a good institution to run the police and the courts, is like, all right, well, we've got layers of this that make sure if something goes wrong here that it gets settled in the next thing. So, all right, if the cop's a bad apple, you can have your day in court and that'll get settled out. I don't think anyone in the system or even in the general public would bat an eye at what came of this. Is it, oh, well, she was still charged. She was charged with disorderly conduct. Well, yeah, she committed that crime. That makes sense. Like, I can't imagine that the judge batted an eye about charging her with this crime. But if you look at it with any sort of common sense, it's absolutely ridiculous that if you had a judge that had any sort of integrity, that after all this other bullcrap that happened, that you say, oh, wait, you're going to charge her with cursing? After what I just saw you people did to her? No, that's insane. I would have done the same thing. Yeah. Charges are dropped. Now let's talk about charging you with assaulting this girl. Like, I don't know how you can look at this case and say, like, oh yeah, the court system, the justice system worked here.
Yeah, and but it shows exactly what you're saying. They overcharge her with all these crimes. There's probably minimum sentencing guidelines for each one, and the DA goes to her attorney and says, look, you're facing 5 to 10 years in prison for this, when she did nothing at all. There was no crime here. And so it's like, well, by the letter of the law, it says you resisted arrest. Is the judge going to find you guilty of resisting arrest? You resisted arrest, So of course she's going to plead guilty to get them thrown out. Now It's on her record forever. She's a criminal. And she's on probation for a year and not allowed to go on vacation to Wildwood. But that's how the system always operates. They overcharge the hell out of you and get you to plead guilty. It's something like, I was reading this recently. Over 90% of federal criminal cases are there's plea agreements, plea deals. Because they don't want it to go to court.
No, because I mean, another popular case among libertarians is the Ross Ulbricht case, and they did the same thing. They piled on all sorts of stuff.
He decided to fight it.
And it becomes
too, and so then it's like, and that's another thing. If you don't take the plea and then you're guilty, they really attack you.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, and then, man, this case in Houston with the no-knock raid and how it's just as more and more information comes out about it, it's looking worse and worse and worse. Is that like everything was made up?
And we'll see what happens.
All lies.
I mean, that one is egregious, and I'm sure it happens more often than people think. But
yeah, we can't as more and more problems come out, more and more things get revealed with how corrupt the police and the courts are. I mean, you can't sit there and say, "Oh, these are all isolated incidences," especially when you have the system that's in place, that there's no good way to have a check and balance with it. And which is why when you talk to these people that say that they favor free markets and capitalism, you really have to drill them on, well, who's who's watching the watchers? Mm-hmm. How are you want a free market in healthcare so that you can have some competition, so that if you as the consumer don't like the product that you're getting, there's someone else that you can go to that, or if even if there's a single supplier in the market for a good or service and they have a monopoly, that they still have to treat their customers well. Because if they start treating them poorly or start charging too much or whatever it is, the customers don't like the service or the product they're getting. Well, that incentivizes maybe not even a competitor, but an alternative service, or them just saying, you know what, it's not worth the price or the hassle anymore. I'm just going to not use this anymore.
Right.
So how does that happen with the government? Oh, we're going to have an election every couple of years. Okay. I mean, that's no way to hold anyone accountable, especially when we don't really see any appreciable change in these sorts of things when you get different people in office.
Give that cop a break. He's just doing his job. He's just trying to go to work. Just
Yeah,
take a job.
Exactly.
Doesn't need to be harassed by some girl.
No. So it's
Frustrating.
yeah. So yeah, we kind of our main thesis was we went all over the place, but just as Scott Horton says, get the drill the leftists on
Beat
their
them from the left.
right, and do the same thing with conservatives. I mean, point to conservatives that they're supporting socialism with the things that they like. Call a spade, or if it's not, call it fascism. If they're supporting fascism, and keep definitions simple so that they can't squirm out of it.
I was gonna say also there's a way to approach it too, because everyone's tired of being called a fascist. So
yeah, that's where you got to be.
Yeah, whatever. I'm not gonna give someone advice, but yeah, I think you and I both do it pretty good, pretty well. Just asking questions, getting them to back themselves in a corner and say that sounds a little bit like fascism. Huh?
Well, that's the thing too. You don't want to, like, if you actually want to have a conversation with someone and try to convince them, then you're not going to be
name calling doesn't help.
Well, yeah, don't shout them down like an angry SJW brigade would be. Right. It's you calmly say, well, do you understand what's fascism? And explain what fascism is, and then say, well, doesn't this look like fascism too?
Bad, right?
Right.
So yeah, okay. So we agree this is fascism. We agree fascism is not a good thing. So what about this over here?
Right. And the best way to do it, or maybe, I don't know, or a good way to do it, and I've had success, I think a lot of people have had success, is don't lecture them on it, but help lead them to come to that conclusion themselves. To say oh, actually, this is actually socialism. That's it's a lot more rewarding to figure out a problem on your own, or not on your own, but for you to come to the conclusion.
You have to come to that conclusion.
Right. As opposed to someone saying, this is what it is, blah, 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 blah. Maybe there's a time and a place for that, but
sure.
But I think I think a lot of us maybe spend a little bit too much time on Twitter and with that impersonal
100 whatever characters you have.
Right. And you're not actually sitting face to face with someone and talking to them. It's just, across a couple computer screens and an internet connection. And it's a lot easier to be aggressive and nasty and say, oh, look at how stupid this person is. Yeah, where,
laugh at this guy.
Yeah.
Probably doesn't convince them.
No, it doesn't.
Anyway, you got a free market story?
Sure. Yeah. My last week, my oven stopped working. Or at least the controls for it.
Got to put more wood in it.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Well, what I tried to do is I stole some parts from the spare tractor I have and put them in there.
But how'd that go?
Well, it didn't quite do the trick, so I went online and I found the model number on the tag for the oven and punched it in on the internet, and it came up with the GE website with identifying all the spare parts. And so first I went on Amazon's normally the quickest and
go-to
way to get everything. And they did have the parts that I wanted to get, but they seemed kind of expensive. And so I went to and also they weren't available for Prime. So the shipping was going to take a while. So I went on Google and did a search and found other places that were selling it for cheaper. But they were charging a lot for shipping, but the shipping was quicker. And so I spent a little bit more money to make sure it was shipped more quickly to me, which why is that a free market success story? Well, I was willing to, the quickness of the delivery was more valuable to me than the extra dollars, that difference in the amount of money. that I would have bought it if I used Amazon. So it was nice to have that option, you know, because even $20, let's say, I don't even know what the difference in cost was, but I think it actually came out about even with what I would have spent on Amazon versus what I spent on. So I changed the parts, and the problem still isn't fixed. So I'm not good with electrical stuff. So I was kind of just
electricity.
Yeah, I was just kind of hoping with the parts I got. So it's something different. I think it's one of the. It might be one of the wire ribbons that's bad. So I went online again and actually bought this direct from the GE Parts site, and they offered free shipping, I think, but it was going to take like a week. So I spent I think it was like $20 to get 1 day shipping. And
got it.
Yeah. I mean, it was worth it to me to spend that extra money. So it's expensive, but in the long run, if I look at it from a year from now, the $20 doesn't really matter. But right now, hopefully fixing the problem in my oven, I would gladly exchange $20 for a week of being able to have my oven back a week sooner. So I think it's a great trade for myself.
Yeah.
So, people will, the initial reaction might be, man, $20 is really expensive for this little tiny part that weighs basically nothing. But, you know what? The fact that they have it priced that way and available means that I'm not the only one that has done that.
Right.
Oh, that's not all. Well, you know what? Prove me wrong. Prove this or prove it correct and prove me wrong. Or what am I trying to say? So we have a mug at libertymugs.com that on the side of the mug, it says this mug costs $100. And it actually does cost $100.
Yeah. And no discount codes are available for that.
Right, because we don't want anyone to be liars, and we don't want to help them be liars.
Right.
So it's like I said, it's priced that product is up there, and it's priced that way because people are buying it. So you have to prove that correct.
And
all of Austrian
free shipping on it too.
Yeah, that's true. If someone doesn't go buy that mug, this makes all of Austrian economics wrong. So if someone does not go out and buy this mug costs $100, the Keynesians win. That's how important this is. If someone goes out and does this. So I mean, Slappy, you're no one's stopping you from doing this.
Someone might be.
That's probably true.
Yeah, I don't know how I'd be able to pull that one off, but someone else there who's single, maybe doesn't have any children.
Well, I've got a cat, so
true.
All right, show notes page for this episode is mcflugel.com/132. You'll be able to find that link to libertymugs.com, and so go there and just type this mug costs $100, or I think it's in the weird category. It should be in the
normal.
Yeah, it should be in the you're awesome if you buy this
you're
category.
Better than your coworkers.
Yeah, I mean, who actually? You'd probably be the only person that that has a mug that actually costs you $100.
Worth $100.
Right, and it's not going to be more than $100.
It's not going to be less either.
Right, because I don't charge taxes at Liberty Mugs, so keep that on the down low. So I'm pretty sure that your bill will be exactly $100. So yeah, I mean, I expect by the time we release this episode, we're gonna have like
several orders.
Yeah, several dozen.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Prove me right. And Go buy that mug. All right. Do we have anything else to say?
I got nothing.
Oh, if you're such a jerk and stupid head that you're not going to buy the $100 mug, why don't you go on Stitcher or iTunes and leave us a review?
Yeah.
Give us a rating and leave us a review. It'll help us have this podcast get a little more reach.
Yeah, 5 stars only.
Yes. All right.
All right, we'll catch you.
Yeah, thanks.
We got a guest next week.
Yeah, we should. It'll be a good one.
Yeah. All right, cool.
All right. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next week.
Peace.